Welcome, trust builders. I'm Sue Dyer, and this is Lead with Trust, where we explore how leaders can build their business on a foundation of trust and reap the rewards of becoming the top performer in their market. Leaders that understand how to use and leverage trust are uniquely positioned to disrupt their industry and dominate their market. Distrust of businesses and business leaders is at an all-time high. Trusted businesses must have trusted leaders, and your team, your customers, and your vendors are waiting for you to step up and elevate the level of trust in your business. My hope is that this podcast can help you start your trusted leader journey. Well, welcome to Lead with Trust, Carla. So happy to have you here today. So excited. I know I've known you for a while, but maybe you could introduce yourself to our trust builders here on the podcast.
Absolutely. And it's been fun getting to know you and learning so much from you, Sue, about trust and its connection with innovation. And that's my work. I'm a marketing and innovation strategist. And I've been in this line of work. Gosh, I've been in marketing for almost 25 years. And innovation was a natural part of the work as it evolved, because there's so much between brands and customers, and also companies and employees, and just people on a team and in between teams, that the success really hinges on trust, whether you're looking at marketing, whether you're looking at innovation. And what I've worked on essentially my whole career is teaching people how to rethink the work that they do and the impact that they can have. And when you get to work with people to help them reevaluate and relook at their work, even that itself takes a lot of trust building along the way to do that. So that's been really fun to dig deep into your work and bring these two components together.
That's so exciting. I know when you think about innovation, some people, I listen to a lot of CEOs making presentations, and they talk a lot about innovation, but I'm not sure everyone exactly agrees on what it is. So I'd be really interested in knowing from your point of view, what exactly is innovation?
And I appreciate the question, because I have a broader definition of innovation. And again, what I'm looking at is helping people rethink innovation. And that was the name of my book that came out earlier this year. And when I looked at the habits of the most prolific innovators in the world, it wasn't that they were amazing product innovators or service line innovators or things like that. It was that they had this ability to consistently come up with ideas that were new, great, and reliable. And that's a very different definition than how many people think of innovation. But I looked at it as in, a new idea is something that hasn't been done before, or hasn't been done before in this way in your industry. So for example, I like to talk about the McDonald's drive-through layout, because it was patterned after a Formula One pit stop. Very new and very innovative. However, it's not enough just to be a new idea. Then there's the great component. And that's something that has an emotional aspect to it. People get excited about it. And that's something advertising great David Ogilvy talks about. When you hear an idea that's truly a great idea, it makes you jealous that you didn't think of it yourself. And then the last one is a reliable idea. And a reliable idea is an idea that makes you money. But if you have only an idea that has one of these three components, it's still not an innovative idea. It's the combination of all three together. And then understanding what it takes to come up with these new, great, and reliable ideas on a consistent basis is really what makes a person, a team, or a company's culture truly innovative.
I love the specificity of that, but also it really makes a lot of sense that you need those three components. And it seems like those would be hard to come by on a regular basis. But I know in your book, you talk about perpetual innovation and a process for perpetual innovation. So I don't know anybody out here that owns a business that wouldn't want that. How do we get that?
And again, as I look at innovation, it doesn't have to be those industry upside down kind of disruptive ideas. There's definitely a place and a need and a desire for those. I'm not going to deny that. But I think what is the most helpful for any business of any size is to be able to consistently come up with these ideas that have a big impact. And when we start with that as a goal, it's kind of like saying, I want to make a video that's viral. You take away the opportunity for inspiration because you're so focused on the outcome. And I spent 5 years working on this book. And a big part of it is because I really wanted to look into, interview, research, watch the work of people who I thought were prolific innovators, but not the ones that are typically in the limelight, like not the Steve Jobs. Everybody writes about him and reads about him. But I wanted to look at people who were just, essentially everyday innovators, and what is it that they're doing, and people who are perpetually innovative, consistently coming up with those ideas over a long period of time that has this impact. And it was very interesting when I realized that they all followed the same process, whether they realized it or not. And the first step that they follow is that they're highly observant of the world around them. And it's so interesting when you're around a person like this, it's almost being around, a child or a toddler where they notice everything. And highly innovative people are like that. They'll notice the font size on a menu. I know one guy who I worked with, he was fascinated by the different icons that walk lights, like walk or don't walk lights around the world were like, and why they were so different. And we take a lot of our life for granted because we're busy or we're preoccupied with our phone or to-do list or whatever else. But innovators really are highly, highly observant to the world around them. And then they're able to take all of these different things that they observe and move it into the second step, and that's distill. So that's where you start to connect the dots between all these things that seem random that you're observing, but they connect the dots and distill them into patterns. So that's the second step. And they start to see, okay, maybe it's about how are we communicating with people in different ways that we don't realize are different. Or, maybe we can communicate simply in ways that are more relatable to local cultures than we realize. If you take the example of the different icons used for walk and don't walk signs. And then these two steps they are fun when you can just become more aware and observant and then start to find those patterns. But it's really kind of a theoretical part of the process. Now, the third step is when we start to move from theory into reality in the work that you do every day, and that's relate. And what we're looking at is how do we take all these things that we've observed and the patterns that we've distilled it into and now relate that into the work that we do. And that's where the biggest opportunity to truly stand out, be different, deliver work that's inspired can happen, but it is absolutely the step that most people or teams or companies fail at because it's hard. And what I see is that even if people will observe something their brand is doing, distill it into a pattern, many times they just copy and paste it then, like that's their idea. But instead of taking that extra step and relating it and saying, like, what is the essence behind that idea that made it work? Is it about communication? Is it about building a community? Is it about shareability? That's the relate step. And then you move into generating ideas. And then the last step is pitching them, because I found that even the greatest ideas can be killed by bad pitches. And then it's the perpetual innovation process, is understanding that you can go through this over and over and over again. And it's not something you do on top of everything else that you have to do at work every day. It's how you begin to learn to think about the work that you do and solving, the constant problems that come up every day, or being able to take advantage of opportunities that are right in front of you. And a lot of times people don't realize it because they're not aware and open and paying attention to what's going on around them.
It kind of reminds me of people I've met that I think we would describe as visionaries, because they are able to, they're very detail oriented. I remember one CEO that I worked with, he always carried his yellow tablet, and but if you just walk from the garage back into the office, and he'd have 2 pages filled out
exactly.
of stuff that he saw. And then he would connect things in a way that nobody else would have. And it was extraordinary what he would be able to do. But I was thinking it'd be hard to press to find someone who really could do all those steps. Like you may connect the dots, but you may not really be able to articulate it in a meaningful way, or definitely not pitch it. So so I can see where you need a team that kind of helps you.
Yeah, I mean, definitely as you look at the dynamics of bringing people together and the different perspectives, it adds richness to all of this. But I also look at that balance between introverts and extroverts. And I've learned so much about this because I'm fairly extroverted, but my husband's very much an introvert. And learning how to give people space so that they can go through this process themselves. And then also having time to come together and to be able to talk it through. So the first one is what introverts need, but to be able to come together and talk things through is what extroverts need. So both are very important and very valuable. But I think we don't often realize how important the dynamics of both having the quiet time and the time together is necessary to really bring out the best ideas that have a lot of different perspectives. And I think it's also important to look at, who do you have in these groups when you're looking at coming up with the teams? Is it the same people that you always have? And I'm not saying they're not great idea people, but the dots that they've collected in their observation stage, in their life and life experiences are the same. And so even if you can change things up by swapping out a person or two on a team, it really makes the whole process new and fresh, and the ideas that you come out can be very different. Now, it can make a team feel very disjointed by doing this because they're used to going through this, the process or everything, they know how everybody else is going to respond, and they know, how to play off of each other. But I think even then what we're doing is taking advantage of familiarity, when what we want here is the infusion of a different perspective. And I think sometimes familiarity, while it can be helpful and efficient, it also makes us a little lazy.
Yeah, I think that's how you get groupthink.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So you're not able to even understand there's a wall there that you need to go under, over, or through.
That's right.
So I know you talk about this being a perpetual process. So I guess they're just eventually you're just sort of, how does that kind of roll out in a business when you sort of have this as a perpetual process?
Yeah, and it can work in a lot of different forms. So one of the companies that I profile, Park Mobile in Atlanta, Georgia, they do this constantly. And they have a little bit more formalized process and culture around it. And a lot of that works so well because they have a really strong culture of trust to start with. They set aside a week every 6 months, and they shut the company down completely. And they communicated ahead of time to all of their partners and all of their customers to say, this is an innovation week. And this is what we're working on, for this period. Sometimes they make it, I think they flip back and forth. Like one time the week is completely blank slate. And then the next time they say, okay, we're working on a very specific part of the business, so that they can make the ideas more broad or more specific, depending on what they need. And so with that, what they're looking at is, how do we consistently come up with these ideas that help us in a part of the business that we focused on? Like if it's broader, it's like, in your area of the business, whatever it is, or however a team comes together, it doesn't have to be a specific team. Tell us what you think would be great and what would work well. So in that case, it's a perpetual innovation process, because it happens in a concentrated way every single 6 months in a week period. And then their weeks end with having to pitch the ideas. But then they're also trained on how to do it. So, sometimes you have a small problem in your department, and that's something that can be fixed. And it doesn't need to wait 6 months until it's a formalized event. For example, there was a woman in the accounting department who found that the team was spending 40 manual hours running a report. And she said, there has to be a better way. And she said, well, the IT people that I met, this is how they do it. So she looked at what they did and she essentially transplanted that process into finance, taught herself how to program, wrote a program to automate the process. And in a short amount of time, took a process that was 40 hours a month and turned it into about, 17 minutes.
Oh
And
my.
and when you look at that, I mean, that's highly innovative because this person is very observant. They're doing something that their team hadn't done before. And it's a reliable idea because it ended up having a big financial impact, especially when you look at the cumulative effect over time, and also how it inspired other people in that department and even outside of traditional product development to look at opportunities to innovate.
Yes, that's exciting. So I know that you've also created innovation styles. So can you tell us about the styles and sort of how would we use those if we wanted to increase innovation?
Yeah, so I call them the 6 archetypes. And what I found is I call them the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs. Like we have, 2 bookend stereotypes of what it's like to be an innovator. There's the, very left brain strategist, Bill Gates, kind of I think of spreadsheets and a lot of numbers and that kind of approach to innovation, almost looking at how do we pseudo prove an idea before we move forward with it. And then there's the Steve Jobs, who seemed to be so right-brained, and he talked about, it's easy when you look in reverse and you can connect the dots, but there's so many more aspects besides just being the strategist, which is one of the archetypes, and then the provocateur, which is another archetype. And that's how I see more Steve Jobs, a provocateur, always pushing the status quo and what can be done, because there's a lot that has to happen to have an idea be successful. One of those is understanding how to collaborate across teams, but with people inside a team and across teams, because you need to get buy-in. You need to have other people's opinions. You need to understand how to finance an idea. If it needs a budget consideration, you have to understand, this may be something that changes behavior. So how do we collaborate to make this idea more effective? There's the psychologist, and that person is really focused on empathy. Like, what will it feel to be the consumer, so to speak, of this idea? And is it just a great idea because it's us as a team or a brand, or is it a great idea from the perspective of the person who would consume this idea? And then we look at the culture shaper. And I think one of the things that's really important about innovation and building trust is the stories that you're able to tell, because that's what brings an idea to life and makes it very real. And then the last one is an orchestrator. And an orchestrator is a person who understands how to maneuver all of those political stepping stones across an organization and get buy-in early on from the right people, is willing to have those difficult conversations up front when they need to be done. And a lot of those other, I think, management sort of aspects. And when you put all 6 of these archetypes together, then you're able to understand the dynamics of what needs to contribute to an idea to make it successful. Now, people always ask me, does your team need to have one of each of these kind of archetypes on your team? And the answer is not necessarily, if the people on your team are able to understand the thought process and the dynamics of other archetypes that your team doesn't have. But if people want to take this assessment, they can go to my website, carlajohnson.co, and on the homepage is the assessment there. And you can take it, and on your results, it shows how your particular archetype interacts with the others. And then also when things are going well and when things are a struggle, sometimes we're not the same person on our good days versus our challenging days, and understanding what that looks like between each of the archetypes as well.
I love having that ability to kind of see the window to the world of what it would take to see myself as an innovator, but also the people that might be surrounding me. And if I was going to put together a team, who would I want on my team, or who do I need? Like, where are my weaknesses? Where are my strengths? I love that idea because it gives you specific things you can do. And I love that idea. I know you and I've talked about this, but how do you see trust and innovation kind of being tied together and one affecting the other?
And it's been a fun topic, fun relationship to explore with you, because one of the things that I see in innovation a lot is that people are not going to stick their neck out because it's, it's I raise my hand with a new idea, and that push some political boundaries or no-nos within a culture, and you get your head chopped off. So there's that of ruffling people's feathers. There's also the thing of trust. If I raise my hand for this idea, are you going to mock me? Am I going to have all of these negative feelings about just expressing what I think might be an idea? And even if if it's a great idea, great, but not every idea is a great idea. I mean, let's be honest, with a lot of things, you have to go through some not so great stuff to get to the real gems. And I think that's another aspect, is that people say they want innovation, but they're not willing to work through, I guess, the lessons along the way. I hesitate to use the word failure, but that's how some people perceive it. And there has to be that level of trust with people in their organizations, that if they pursue an idea and it doesn't work out as planned, that they're not going to get fired, they're not going to get reprimanded, that there won't be alternative consequences. And I think having that culture of trust first is paramount if you're ever going to get to innovation that is something that will affect the performance of your company. And I think as you look at leadership in an organization, you have to be a trusted leader to be a true innovator.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think the greatest tragedy for any business would be that someone, and it could be any place in your whole organization, has ideas that are pent up inside and never get shared. Or if they get shared, they get, foo-fooed. And so then they never share again.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I think, boy, the capacity that you've lost in your business is just exponential, because if you nurtured that, because you had a culture that allowed them to share their ideas, and maybe one idea combined with another idea that combined with another idea to create a breakthrough, that would be like orders of magnitude great for your company. And I don't see very many companies that actually do that.
I don't either. And I think that's why when we do find one, we hold them up, put them on a pedestal as the way to do it. And I think it's also why when we look at teams and the makeup of teams, that people tend to go with the safe bets. Okay, if we get a strategist on a team, they should be able to figure out how to do this. But you get a provocateur on a team who's always pushing that status quo, unless your culture is very much like that, like an Apple. But I think they still, had enough trust issues with different things. You can't move forward in ways that will truly help you realize your potential. And people, especially in this last 18 months, 2 years, people want to bring their whole selves to work. And if you don't trust that you're able to do that when you come to work every single day, it means you're leaving part of who you are at home. And then that also means you're not bringing your whole self to the ideas, to the opportunities, to everything that you contribute to a company. And I think that's a huge loss that companies don't realize when they look at trust and at innovation and at performance, because it does have a bottom line impact.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Sorry to interrupt, but if you're looking to improve any area of your life, one of the first things you'll want to do is to figure out where you are today and where the gaps are, and then really get clear on where you want to go. Visionary leaders need clarity, like human beings need oxygen. It's essential. That's why my team and I put together a great starting point for you on your trusted leader journey. It's called the Trusted Leader Profile, and it will allow you to take charge of the atmosphere atmosphere in your business by helping you understand your trusted leader style and how you can elevate the level of trust in your business. With understanding, you can make better choices and grow the level of trust and your results. For being a listener to the show, it's 100% complimentary for you to access the profile. All you have to do is go to www.sudyco.com/profile. And Sudyco is SUDYCO. Again, that's www.sudyco.com/profile. I really believe that the profile will help you understand the norms you bring to your business and unlock the next level of leadership for you. And what we were talking about before we started too, just the whole idea of complying, that instead of people creating a trusted atmosphere and a trusted leadership, that people are just complying with what you're asking them to do. You're not doing anything to provoke their creativity. Well, it can't come forward. As you and I have talked about, until you've created an atmosphere that allows for the creativity to emerge, and you've created the high trust culture, you can't have innovation. It just isn't going to happen. Maybe lightning might strike once, but even that, the lightning might die because nobody listened to them.
Exactly. That is so true. And I think about, my husband and my daughter went to Iceland just recently and just got back. But I think about the interactions I've had with brands in helping them prepare for their trip. And I'm a big fan of REI. And it didn't matter what issue we had or what we were looking for. I knew that whoever I spoke to at REI could solve my problem. I knew they didn't have to go to a manager. I knew I didn't have to wait. I knew these things. And that's one of the things that I love about the company, is that it's very evident that they have a culture of trust, that management trust, especially frontline employees, because of how they're allowed to handle things just right there on the spot.
That's awesome. And it stands out in your mind. So that leads to my next question, which is, what advice can you give to leaders who really want to start innovating?
Well, my very first question to a leader who says we have an issue with innovation and we're not able to realize our true potential. My first question is, have you articulated your purpose? Like, do you know why you're in business? And it's never about the profits, but it's about what you're serving up, the difference that you're making in the lives of your customer. So Clayton Christensen would talk about this from the perspective of, what's the job to be done? Roy Spence, this is probably my favorite book on organizational purpose that's out there. His book is called "It's Not What You Sell, It's What You Stand For." He says, what is it that makes you wake up and get excited every single day when you get out of bed, that you would do even if you didn't get paid to do? And Simon Sinek talks about it as in finding your why. But when you have a purpose-led organization, it's highly conducive to innovation, because people understand, here's why I'm here every day. I'm here not to process accounts payable receipts. I'm not here to do demand gen campaigns. I'm not here just to hire 4 new people in IT this week. I'm here to help people make a difference in the moments that matter for my customers, depending on what the purpose is for your organization. And there's I think it's in the movie about the women who, Hidden Figures. It's in that movie. And Kevin Costner, there's a scene where Kevin Costner's walking down the hallway, and he asks the janitor what he's doing. And he says, well, I'm not mopping the floor. He says, no, you're not. You're helping to send a person to the moon, the first person to the moon. And when we shift and start to look at our work in that manner, one, it's highly conducive to trust, because everybody is there for the same clearly articulated reason. And it's also perfect for sparking creativity and innovation, because We all know what we're trying to create here. And so many cultures and organizations get bogged down in the minutia of, well, I'm trying to get this campaign out the door and I don't care that you need to do X, Y, Z. This is why I'm here. But in organizations that are driven first by purpose, there's that pause to say, okay, between what we both want, how do we move it forward based on the purpose that we're trying to achieve here? And that a lot of times begins to take away conflict and dissension. And it reminds people, this is why we're here, remember? And
I see in a lot of organizations where they have multiple purposes, depending on what silo you're in.
Exactly.
Depending what time of year it is. And if you're publicly traded, then it's very clear what your purpose is.
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with the customer.
Exactly. It's that quarterly, stock performance. But then you start to look at some companies like Whole Foods, and I'm more familiar with many of the consumer, B2C kind of brands, but that's what they talk about. And the interesting thing is that I see more B2B driven, purpose driven brands. And I used to think it was because purpose was so important, that they were pursuing this. And what I realized, it's that they were pursuing purpose because profit mattered. And they understood that the way that they were pursuing profit in the past was no longer going to get them to the level of business performance that they were seeking and actually needed to get to anymore, unless they started to shift how they did business and were more focused on purpose. And when you look at these companies, the ones that are the legacy companies that are high performing over long periods of time, the perpetual innovators, they are very purpose driven.
And that's the same thing that I believe is the case for leadership as well. If leadership doesn't shift how they operate from the old models we've had for 100, 150 years to a trusted leadership model, they will not be able to be successful either, because the things have changed far too much.
I agree. And it sounds, I'll say it, kind of easy to say, oh, we just have to go with purpose. All right. Well, then that next tier, though, is what values drive the behavior to make sure that purpose happens. Mm-hmm. And I think that gets down into the nitty gritty of performance that people can start to sink their teeth into, is that if you say, okay, if this is our purpose, what values do we need to have that support that purpose? Now, what behavior will we hire, fire, reprimand, and reward against that ensure those values show up every single day? And I have clients who have gone through this process, and we've worked on their purpose, and then we articulate the values. And then we look at that. Okay, as we're going through the recruiting process, what's the messaging that we have? It can't just be the same thing that you've always done with a new tagline or a new slogan. It's a different message based on the purpose and the values and how you show up, and making it clear that you're not just a person, an organization that talks about the values, but this is truly how you do business. It's how you evaluate people. It's how you look at team interactions. It's how you look at conflict. It's how you look at top performance, and it's how you look at leadership, and celebrating the examples when people exhibit these values day in and day out, and showing what the small wins are until you have the cumulative story of the bigger wins that happen. But you will see a financial performance as long as you're genuine and true to them.
I find that fascinating, that the things that we know really work to create momentum. Now businesses are beginning to see that those are the things they need to do in order to become profitable.
Right.
So
it is.
I think that's not all bad.
Well, and to be honest, like, money is what gets people's attention, right? But to think that purpose and values are a, nice warm bath, but we've got real business to do, and so we'll set that aside. This is the real business. Like today, this is the real business.
It is, and I see many CEOs and director level people who talk about values, but they're like a piece of paper on the wall. They're not really the values by which they operate. And I've heard several CEOs of startups or fast growing, very, very fast growing businesses go, you know, when I finally exited and sold my business, I realized that what I failed to do was figure out my culture. And so it was a good thing they sold.
Because that would have caught them pretty quick after that, because these are the things that create the culture. What you believe determines how you behave, and that determines how people interact, and that is what creates culture.
Absolutely.
And how you tell that story. That's why the culture shaper as an archetype is so important, because if you want to change the culture, that my friend Michael Margolis, who's a fantastic storyteller, he talks about, if you want to change the culture, change the stories that you tell.
That sounds perfect. Now, I just wanted to chat a little bit about, I know you just emceed a really big 2-day summit and you listened to everybody. And I just want all these digital marketing experts, the top ones on the planet. What did you walk away with?
You know, I felt so privileged to be a part of this event. It was for my client Sunstar, and their European group collaborated to put on this event. It was a collaboration between HR, public relations, and their digital strategy group. And what they're looking at is elevating the company by looking at how they continue on their digital transformation journey. So they're looking at what do we need to know internally as a company, not just as marketers or HR people or PR people. What do we need to know about this journey that we're on, learn from people who are experts in this around the world, such as yourself, and start to think differently so we act differently so we can continue on this journey. And I think one of the strongest messages that came out across the board, and this was interesting, it was how many times people talked about the way that you get through transformation successfully is having an open culture that allows people to contribute in a way that's natural for them. And in order to do that, you have to have trust. Because if we look at transformation, whether it's digital transformation or business transformation, as far as a business model or innovation, looking at how we do things differently, there's so much about business today that has changed so fast in this last year. And I give my client Sunstar a huge amount of kudos, because they open this conversation to every single employee globally. And so anyone was allowed to attend, or they could watch it after the fact. And so they're creating this environment of trust to say, these are things that you need to know every single day when you do your job. It's not just for a few isolated people who are the frontline workers in whatever this area is. We trust that you will take this information and you'll understand how to implement it every day. And they have a plan for ongoing training and conversations on all of these topics. But it was so interesting to watch how all of the attendees were so eager to contribute and to discuss things in chat and afterwards. And it was a fantastic opportunity to understand. And this was the theme of their event this year, Elevate, to elevate not only the experience that their company delivers to every customer, but to elevate the understanding of why this is important, and to elevate people's interest and excitement and participation in making this happen. And I think that's something that then rolls into the other 363 days of the year, is we all now understand why we're on this journey and why it matters, and now understand some of these tactical things that we can do every single day. So then when you have those conversations in team meetings, they have a completely different dynamic, because everybody's on a page together, understanding the journey in a greater depth.
I love the idea too, because years ago, I was a part of a group that was working on creating improvement in labor relations across the country, really across the world. And one of the things that we created was this joint learning. so that you could learn together, create a common models, common language, and that created a cohesion that really helped them to talk, especially if there was conflict. They had ways that they could then work together. And I think that Sunstar sounds like they've done a lot of that, just planting some seeds for some common models, common language, common things that they're going to work towards together that will elevate them across all the different countries that were represented. I think it's going to be awesome to watch over the next 2 or 3 years.
I agree. They're just doing some fantastic things. And I think it's also a reflection of their culture of trust, of how willing they are to talk about this externally, including some of the things that didn't go well. And I know I've seen companies get up and talk about their transformation journey or whatever journey, but what didn't go well is always kind of glossed over. And that's what I really appreciate and respect about this group is they'll tell you the story, warts and all. And I think that stems from a fair amount of trust.
Well, that is, again, transparency is trust. Yeah.
Right.
I always ask my guests one last question. So what is your best advice, like things that somebody could do today to begin to build more innovation?
I would say that my advice to start today is to raise your awareness. And that can come in a couple different ways. It's like we talked earlier, be more observant of the world around you. It can be raise your awareness as in listen more and talk less, because I think there's a lot of things that you'll start to hear that you didn't before, whether it's other people's ideas or other people's perspectives. Awareness of little changes, little ideas, little things along the way that maybe you didn't notice before. One of the things that I like to do when I start working with a client is ask them a 1-question survey. And that is, does my boss support the idea? Does my boss support my ideas? And I think even having an awareness of that, of how often people bring ideas to you to hear or don't bring those ideas, is an important aspect of awareness, because you start to realize, people used to come to me with ideas, but now they don't. Why is that?
And with that, I think we have a lot to all think about. I so appreciate you being a guest. I just love your work and what you're doing. And I know that you're making a huge impact in the clients that you're able to work with. And everybody, get the book, the brand new book. This is her 10th book. So Rethink Innovation. You can buy it anywhere that you can get books. So run out and grab that. You can go to carlajohnson.co and get the assessment, give it to your team, and see where are you guys on the innovation style scale here. And what group do you have? Maybe everybody's the same. You can understand why maybe you have come up with the same conflict all the time or the same result. So I appreciate it so much. Thank you, Carla.
Sue, it's been a true pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Lead with Trust, and that wherever you're listening to this podcast, you will subscribe. And if you enjoyed this episode, send it to someone who you think can really use this message that you got today. And also, please leave us a review. Your honest review wherever you listen to your podcasts would be much appreciated. And of course, the more reviews we get, the better they are, the better for the podcast. I'm truly on a mission to get more and more people to understand that trust is the essential element. So I hope you'll be part of that. This show really exists to help you, leaders, to build your business on a foundation of trust so that you can reap the rewards of becoming that top performer in your market. I see over and over where no one can possibly reach the levels of those people that understand how to build a high trust culture in their business. Now, today, if you're really curious about starting your trusted leader journey, you can get started right away if you just take the free Trusted Leader Profile, and you can learn where you fall along the Trusted Leader Continuum. And this really can unlock your confidence on where you are and what you need to do. It's very specific on what you can do. Gives you a snapshot of your leadership style. So if you want to take that, just go to www.sudyco, SUDYCO.com, and then /profile, and you will get immediate access to the Trusted Leader Profile. Once again, that is www.sudyco, SUDYCO.com /profile. All right, that's a wrap. I just can't wait to hang out with you again on our next episode.